Every food allergen we eat, like peanut or walnut, leads to the production of specific bacteria in the gut that specifically calm down the immune system. So not only are they amazing sources of protein, fat, and fiber, but each allergen also plays a very important role in keeping our gut bacteria healthy and varied.
Welcome back to the Exam Room Nutrition Podcast, your guide to giving better nutrition advice. I'm Colleen Sloan, a PA and dietitian, and today I'm joined by Dr. Carina Venter. She's one of the world's leading experts in food allergies. She's a registered dietitian with a PhD in allergy and immunology, a professor of pediatrics, and a researcher whose decades of work have shaped the way we think about maternal diet, infant feeding, and allergen introduction. When it comes to allergens, she is one of the most trusted voices you'll hear. And I'm really excited to share our conversation because I asked her the exact questions that come up every day in my practice. Things like, does mom's diet during pregnancy or breastfeeding help protect a child from allergies? How much time should we recommend between trying one allergen and the next? Is there a preferred order for introducing allergens? And when it comes to eggs, should parents offer the white, the yolk, or the whole egg? I can't count how many times I've been asked that question. And then how much of an allergen does a baby actually need to eat? And what about families with a strong allergy history? How should we approach allergen introduction for that baby? So by the end of this episode, I promise you'll feel so confident talking about allergen introduction with your families. But first, I'm debuting a new segment that I'm calling Wait, Is That True? So I recently saw a brain optimization specialist, whatever that means, online saying that steak and eggs are better for brain health than blueberries. So is that true? No, not at all. Now hear me out. There is nothing wrong with steak and eggs. They can absolutely be part of a balanced diet, and they do provide some important nutrients for brain health. Eggs are a great source of choline, omega-3s, and B vitamins. But dismissing blueberries for brain health, that's just misleading and ridiculous. So here's what we know. Blueberries are rich in anthocyanins. That's the flavonoid that gives them their deep blue color. And they've been studied extensively for brain health. The Mind diet, which was specifically designed to support cognitive function, recommends eating blueberries twice a week. And we have loads of research showing that 1 to 1.5 cups a day can improve reaction time, memory, word recall, and overall cognitive performance. They also help lower inflammation in the brain, improve blood vessel function, boost blood flow, and support the communication between brain cells. All of that adds up to better memory, executive function, attention, and more. And the benefits go beyond the brain. Blueberries are linked to a lower risk of type 2 diabetes, better gut health, improved exercise recovery, and even lower blood pressure, which matters since high blood pressure is a risk factor for dementia. Plus, blueberries are beneficial at any life stage. And as you'll hear from my guest today, her research found that introducing blueberries in the first 6 months of life boosted healthy gut bacteria and reduced allergy-related immune cells. Pretty cool stuff. So if your patient comes to you and says that they heard that blueberries aren't good for brain health, you can confidently say, that's not true. Blueberries really are brain food. The science is solid. If you come across a crazy nutrition claim on social media that you want me to unpack, tag me in it at Exam Room Nutrition, and I'll feature it in an upcoming episode. All right, now let's get to the episode. Enjoy my conversation with Carina all about allergen introductions. Carina, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I'm really excited about this conversation. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me, Colleen.
Okay, so I think we need to start big picture. So to start off, can you please let us know what are the most common food allergens that parents and providers should be aware of?
So, I think first of all, it's important to say there's 2 types of food allergies. The one is the immediate type, which, you eat a Snickers bar or perhaps something else containing peanut, lips start swelling up, mostly immediately, but normally within 2 hours. And then we have the delayed type of allergies, which can occur a day or a week later. So if we first talk about the immediate type allergies, we have the top 9 allergens. And these are also covered by the food allergy labeling laws, FELPA. They are milk, egg, wheat, fish, shellfish, peanut, tree nuts, sesame, and soy. For the delayed type of allergies, we also see allergies to these top 9, but it can also include foods that we don't often consider to be allergenic food, like some fruit or vegetables, even rice or oatmeal.
I think that distinction is really important because I have a lot of parents who will come in and say that their baby ate, strawberries for the first time or mango for the first time, and they got a rash on the face, and they think that the baby is allergic to it. And so in pediatrics, we focus really heavily on introducing allergens to babies, but I want to back up first before we get into that conversation of how we do that and what the process looks like, and talk about the maternal diet. So is there anything that pregnant or breastfeeding women can eat that may help protect their child from developing an allergy?
Yeah, so I've literally spent the last 20 years of my career researching the maternal diet during pregnancy and how that's associated with child allergy development. First, the guidelines currently say that in terms of food allergy, there's no need to avoid the allergens. But the guidelines don't actually say you have to eat them, because we're not really clear about whether we have to eat them. But what we do know is if you like an allergen, you love peanut, keep eating it. My research has really focused on the bigger picture and the overall maternal diet. And we've now published a number of papers from different cohorts showing that if women eat more vegetables and more yogurt, and I think the yogurt really stands for fermented food. So if you don't like yogurt, any other type of fermented foods like kimchi would probably do the trick as well. So eating more of those two foods and then reducing intake of low fiber, sugary and fried food, and also reduction in meat. And I think the reduction in meat is just an indication of eating more plant-based foods. It really helps with reduction in food allergies, eczema, asthma, and allergic rhinitis or seasonal allergies in the children.
I think that's really fascinating. Okay, now for years, parents were told to delay allergenic foods. So we would wait until after 1 to introduce, peanuts and things like that. But now the advice is like the exact opposite as science and medicine has advanced. So I'm curious to hear what drove that shift in the guidance and how strong is the evidence for early introduction of allergens?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. My daughter is going to be 20 in September. And I was about 1 week of giving birth to her when I got the call to say that the LEAP study was funded. This is now 20 years ago. And this study actually looked at whether early introduction of peanut can reduce peanut allergy. The results were mind-blowing. There was an 80% reduction in the group of children that ate peanuts from 4 to 11 months of age. And that was sort of like then validated by the EAT study, another study also done in the United Kingdom. We now have some studies across Europe also indicating that early introduction of allergens really help with reduction in food allergies. Following from the LEAP study, we had the change in the NIH or the NIAID, which is the allergy arm of the NIH guidelines. The American Academy of Pediatrics changed their guidelines. Very excitingly, for the first time ever, the dietary guidelines included the fact that we need to introduce peanut as soon as we start introducing solid foods, and that once we start introducing solids and we got the peanut in, that there really is no need to delay the introduction of any of the other allergens.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting and fascinating. However, I'm a pediatric PA. When I have this conversation with parents about introducing peanuts and eggs and all of these different types of allergens, their eyes kind of glaze over and they look quite afraid and quite concerned because maybe they've heard for years that you need to delay the introduction. So there's a lot of education and reassurance that we have to provide parents. So I want to move into that, the timing and some practical strategies for how do we actually educate our parents on this introduction. So when do you think providers should begin this conversation with parents? Like around what age?
I think, as soon as providers start having this introduction of solid food conversation, the food allergens really need to be included. But the simple answer is that once you start with solid food introduction, 1 or 2 vegetable or fruit purees are probably fine. And then you can follow on with the allergens. We tend to introduce peanut first, then followed by egg. Often we don't have to have the milk discussion because either they've already had infant formula or the mother gave yogurt as one of the first weaning food. So then after the peanut, the egg and the milk, we go for cashew, walnut, because walnut also covers us for pecan. And especially here in America, where we're going to eat some pecan pie at some point in our lives, it's good to get the walnut in. And then we have the sesame is our last allergen that we normally introduce. With the rest of the allergens like fish and shellfish and soy, we tend to say, are these foods you eat in the house? Is that part of the family meals? And then we just introduce it in the diet alongside family foods. But really, the discussion about allergen introduction should start right at the beginning of solid food introduction, and the allergen should go in quickly as we introduce solid foods. If I can have a little bit more time about the parents with the big eyes, being very anxious about introducing allergens at such an early age, I often explain that the younger the baby is, the friendlier the immune system, and the least likely the child is to have anaphylaxis or very severe reactions. You can never say never in allergy, but we very, very rarely see anaphylaxis in young babies. And so that is really the best time to introduce the allergens, is why this immune system is still developing. It's still learning new things. It's much happier to see new foods than when you get with a 15-year-old that's never seen a peanut and you now want to introduce it, when perhaps the immune system is not that friendly anymore. So get it in early is really the safest time, even though parents often think that's the most dangerous time to give babies allergens.
And now a quick word from our sponsor, Cozy Earth Sheets. Now, fun fact, I share my bed with two 60-pound dogs. Add in the South Florida heat, and most nights feel like a sauna session. But Cozy Earth's bamboo sheets completely change that. After a long day in clinic or podcast recording, sliding into bed feels like the best part of my day. They're soft, cool, and somehow, even with two furry heaters snuggled up next to me, I actually stay comfortable all night. So if you're like me and you've been struggling to get good sleep, do yourself a favor and check out Cozy Earth. Head to CozyEarth.com and use my code EXAM for 40% off. And you can thank me later. All right, now back to the episode. Oh, thank you for breaking that down, because honestly, I've not known what to say to reassure them other than that the guidelines, now say that it's safe and we've got plenty of evidence to prove that. I think that's a fantastic and really, really helpful discussion to have with parents, that this is truly the safest time to do it. So thank you for pointing that out. Now, I also appreciate the order in which you've discussed introducing these allergens, and I want to come back to that. But I'm curious to what your opinion and what the literature says about how many days we should wait before offering a new allergen, because this comes up a lot and there is a little bit of a debate. And I would say a lot of guidelines kind of disagree on how long we need to wait in between introducing the allergens.
Yeah, so the AAP used to say that we need to wait 3 to 4 days between each new food, irrespective of whether they're food allergens or not. But in a book that they published now about 2-3 years ago, Caring for Your Young Child, they clearly say that in the past, we used to recommend introducing every new food 3 to 4 days apart. Latest evidence shows that multiple foods can be introduced at once. So the AAP is actually saying you can mix the food from the start. Personally, and in my clinical practice, I introduce one new food a day. I may do banana and apple in one go. I have never been brave enough or recommended parents to do 2 new allergens at the same time. Our clinical practice really is to do 1 new allergen a day, or perhaps even 2 days apart. But as I've already said, children that's going to have immediate type symptoms to an allergen is going to have reactions within 5, 10, 20 minutes, maximum 2 hours. So doing it 1 day apart really helps. The majority of the parents I deal with feel comfortable with 2 days apart. So we'll do peanut Monday, Tuesday, and then we're going to do egg Wednesday, Thursday. And I think that's fine. And the reason I keep referring to our clinical practice is because there is no guideline to tell us how many days should we wait between each new allergen. And this is really where, again, shared decision-making come in, work with the family. I have families that's not going to do 1 new allergen every 2 days. We do it 1 new allergen a week. that's their comfort zone. I have mothers that come back. They call me 2 days later. They said, actually, I've gone home. I felt so brave after talking to you. I've tried cashew and peanut yesterday and she's fine. That's okay too. I think just really work with family and their comfort zone.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's what I do in my practice as well. Now, if a baby eats an allergen without any reaction, right? So within the 10, 15 minutes, they're perfectly fine. Does that mean that they're protected, that they will not develop an allergy later on? Or could an allergy develop, maybe during exposure 2, 3, or years down the road?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And I wish it was as simple as saying, let's feed you a teaspoon of peanut butter once and we've cured you from peanut allergy forever. Unfortunately, the immune system loves consistency. If there's something that every single study, whether we talk about oral immunotherapy or early introduction of allergens or feeding food, we've learned from the immune system is consistency is key. And so once you introduce the allergen, we normally say that it has to be eaten about twice a week. Look, if the baby loves peanut butter, you want to feed it every day, fine. Baby gets sick and go off their food and they don't want to eat for a week and we don't have allergens for a week, that's okay too. But as long as they're happy and eating about twice a week is how often we recommend it. Now, how long should this be going for? So in the LEAP study, the children ate peanut for 5 years to induce tolerance. Now, interestingly, after 5 years in the study, they then asked the parents to stop feeding peanuts. And 3 children developed peanut allergy because they stopped eating. Now, it wasn't statistical significant, as people often like to say, but there were still 3 children and it wasn't 0. So we normally say to families that we really want the consistency of eating the allergens twice a week for about 5 years of age. Perhaps they can then dial it down and it doesn't have to be weekly, but it should never be a matter of stop eating the allergens altogether. The immune system like that reassurance that the allergens are there, they're friendly, you shouldn't be afraid of it, and we don't need to launch a reaction to anything that's in the gut.
I think that's really helpful and a good piece of information. Plus, these allergens are quite nutritious foods anyways, and it would be very wise of the parent to include them in a daily or weekly diet of their child anyways, just for optimal health. So I appreciate that answer of continuing to include that allergen in their diet.
And, if I can talk about that a little bit more, I collaborate with a colleague at University College Cork, Liam O'Mahony, quite a lot, where we study the microbiome. And our latest paper, just published in Allergy now about a month ago, show that every food allergen we eat, like peanut or walnut, leads to the production of specific bacteria in the gut that specifically calm down the immune system. So not only are they amazing sources of protein, fat, and fiber, but each allergen also plays a very important role in keeping our gut bacteria healthy and varied. So many reasons for eating food allergens.
Oh, yeah. And I love talking about gut health. So I'm fascinated by that. I'll drop that link down in the show notes if you guys want to check that out. Now, I'm curious because it comes up often regarding portion sizes. So how much of the allergen should the baby be eating?
Yeah, so I know you're a PA, but you're also a dietitian. And one of the biggest dilemmas we had was how much of these nuts and allergens do we have to eat? And, first for tolerance, but then secondly, also to fit into a healthy diet for a baby. And as you know, we don't have portion sizes for children under 1 year of age, but we have estimates of calories and protein. And so to cut a long story short, we need about 2 grams of the protein of the nut or the egg or the seed or milk a week, twice a week. So 2 grams twice a week of the protein. And in terms of nuts, it's sort of like a heaped or a rounded teaspoon of nut butter. For egg, it's about 1/3 of an egg twice a week. And for milk, it's about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of milk a week. But milk, we never struggle to get the milk proteins in because everybody loves eating yogurt. And having spent a lot of time doing calorie counts and protein counts, I can't really say that as long as we keep to that portion for the main 5 allergens, which I've highlighted twice a week, we're still within the dietary guidelines. So to answer a long story short, you need about 2 grams of the protein twice a week. For most things, it's around a teaspoon, third an egg, quarter a cup of milk. And, it fits really within a healthy diet as well.
Yeah, parents always are asking me, how much should my baby eat? And it's a very tricky question because you're right. We don't have those set numbers, that set portion size guidelines. So I think that's a really helpful explanation that you gave. Now, another question that comes up all the time is how? Like, how do I introduce walnuts to a baby? So if you could just kind of give us some guidance on some of those allergens and how you recommend that introduction.
So first of all, and thank you for asking me that, because the one big thing I haven't said yet is that feeding babies nut butters off a teaspoon is a choking risk, according to the AAP. So you have to take that rounded teaspoon I just referred to and mix it with either breast milk, formula milk. You can mix it with yogurt. That's my preferred way of feeding babies nut butters and I mix it with a plain yogurt without added sugar because now I have the nut butter, which is good for the microbiome, but I also have the probiotic in the yogurt that's good for the microbiome. You can also feed it with, fruit purees or vegetable purees. As if you do baby late weaning or when they get to the point where they can do finger foods, we use a lot of pancakes or baked waffles. Again, where we don't use sugar, we sweeten it with fruit to feed it. But that first initial feed, and the NIAID guidelines say that too, is put a little bit of the butter, liquid, diluted with water or breast milk or, formula milk on a tip of a teaspoon, feed it to the baby, wait about 10 minutes, and then you can follow with a whole teaspoon. And so there's sort of like the initial introduction, and then there's the next step where you can mix it with different kinds of food matrices, if you want to call it, or bake it into things to feed to babies.
That's really helpful. And I love the combination of yogurt with the nut butter. It's so smart, again, for that gut health. Okay, let's talk about eggs specifically, because this one also comes up often and because there's been a little bit of misunderstanding between, do I need to give the yolk first? Do I give the white? Do they have to be separate? So what's your opinion on how do we introduce eggs to a baby?
That's another great question. I love talking about egg, and perhaps one day I can come back on your podcast and talk about egg ladders. But today, I have to explain 2 aspects of egg that's important to know when we do early introduction of egg. The majority of the egg allergens are in the white. So feeding yolk doesn't actually address egg allergy or prevention of egg allergy. We really need to feed the whole egg. But the problem is that when we actually feed boiled egg, one of the allergens are almost completely destroyed. And when we feed very moist scrambled egg or almost like an uncooked scrambled egg, this is the one allergen where we often see reactions in babies. Once again, not anaphylaxis. They may get a few hives, a few rashes. It settles down normally within 5 to 10 minutes. So you want to give the whole egg, but you want to make sure that it is cooked well enough. And so what we normally say is to at least start off with a boiled egg, probably cooked for about 10 minutes, mash it up, feed it once or twice, then get a little bit braver, go for something like a scrambled egg, but scrambled for at least 6 to 7 minutes. And then if they're okay with that, then you can go for a more moist version of scrambled egg. But it's important to sort of like do almost like a little egg ladder for early introduction, where we can do the boiled, well scrambled, and then some scrambled egg. And that's the way that we want to continue with the intake of egg.
Oh, that's super helpful. I love that. I'm curious as to the reason behind the order in which you recommend introducing the allergens. Why do you start with peanut?
So I still have many collaborations with European colleagues and colleagues around the world. And so we discuss this order all the time. And the order is very different for different countries. But here in America, our number 1 and 2 allergens that we're dealing with for IgE-mediated allergy really is peanut and egg. We, of course, see a lot of cow's milk allergy in the first year of life, but children tend to outgrow that. So the allergens that we're really trying to fix is the peanut and the egg. To some extent, milk, but like I said, milk is normally introduced without us having to go there because of yogurt. And so peanut and egg in America go the first two. Then in terms of prevalence, cashew is the third one, then the walnut and the pecan. Interestingly, I explained that walnut and pecan to the immune system is the same nut. So is cashew and pistachio. So once you've given cashew, you've covered pistachio, then we do walnut, and we're beginning to see more and more sesame allergy, which is really why that is the number 5 food that we really go for. So really based on the country's specific prevalence and most important allergens in that country.
Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. All right. You mentioned cow's milk protein allergy, and I wanted to just unpack that. And how is that different from like a sensitivity? Because parents often confuse the two between a milk allergy or a, milk sensitivity and lactose intolerance. Can you speak to either of those?
Yeah. So cow's milk allergy is by far the most complex presentation of food allergy in early childhood, because cow's milk allergy has this big umbrella where we see the immediate type symptoms, as you would see in a peanut allergy. But then we have this other aspect, which is 80% of the cow's milk allergies we see, which are the delayed symptoms such as the reflux and the constipation and the diarrhea, and debatable, but perhaps worsening of their eczema. And this is referred to as non-IgE mediated cow's milk allergies. Many clinicians still refer to these as cow's milk sensitivities, but they're truly triggered by the immune system. And the only form of cow's milk reactions that's not triggered by the immune system is lactose intolerance. That's really not often seen in young children. And I think if parents are concerned about either gut symptoms like diarrhea, constipation or reflux, or some skin symptoms, which isn't leading to the hives and the swelling of the face, they need to see their PCP, perhaps get a referral to an allergist or a gastroenterologist that can help them decipher what presentation of cow's milk allergy they are dealing with and, how to best manage the infant.
What does the research show about a baby who maybe does have true cow's milk protein allergy and the introduction of milk? So could they still have yogurt and cottage cheese at that 6 months, or do we need to completely avoid dairy foods until 1?
So in terms of the children with more like the delayed type symptoms or the intolerant or sensitivity symptoms, we use what we refer to now as the milk ladder. And so often come 6 months, we would start giving them a cookie mashed up. Again, we have recipes for these cookies which are without sugar. And we sort of do cookies, pancakes, muffins, and then get them to yogurt because we know they're not going to have anaphylaxis. But in the past, we would have waited for 2 years. Now we say at 6 months, we're going to start introducing all these different versions of baked milk containing foods, try and get the infant to actually get to consuming yogurt and cow's milk by about 12 months of age. The children with the immediate type cow's milk allergy is a little bit more complex. Depending on where you live in the world, they may also start doing this process of baked milk products at 6 months and then get the children within 12 months to consume cow's milk. In other areas of the world, clinicians prefer to keep the child off milk until they're about 12, 18 months, so they can come to hospital where we feed them a muffin. If they're okay, they eat these baked milk containing foods for 6 months, and then we could do a milk challenge. So it really depends on the type of cow's milk allergy. But I think the main message I would like to give to clinicians and parents today is don't sit on any allergy, particularly a milk allergy, for years. The sooner the children get the milk in, the sooner they're going to develop tolerance. Using this ladder approach in Ireland, there is almost no kid above the age of 3 or 5 years with a milk allergy. Because the minute they get diagnosed, milk gets introduced, and they do amazingly well in terms of tolerance development.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So at 1, let's say we have a baby who maybe has a delayed sensitivity, maybe not a full IgE-mediated allergy to cow's milk protein. At 1, how do we recommend introducing cow's milk? Is it still through, baked goods, or can they just give them, 2 ounces of milk and see how they do?
Yeah, I think that also, again, depends on the family and that's decision-making and probably from clinician to clinician. My practice is I like to put them through the ladder, but I'm not going to sit a month on a cookie and then a month on a pancake. I would literally do 2 days of cookies, 2-day pancake, 2-day muffin, 2-day yogurt, 2-day bit of cheese, and really try and get them onto milk, within a week or 2 weeks. Other doctors may prefer to just say we're going to do an ounce of milk, 2 ounces of milk tomorrow, 3 ounces, and get them on 7 to 8 ounces of milk within a week. I feel, again, talking to parents after avoiding milk for 12 months, they much keener or happier to do the baked versions because it's more of a slow progression than just putting the child straight onto cow's milk. But 2 practices, use what worked for you and the family best.
All right, if you're listening right now and thinking, Colleen, I'm driving. There's no way I can remember all this stuff. Don't worry, I got you. I went ahead and typed up a 1-page cheat sheet with all the allergen introduction recommendations we just covered. Timing, how much, how often, even the milk and egg ladders, so you can easily refer back to it later. Just head over to examroomnutrition.com/allergen to grab your copy, and I'll link to it down below in the show notes. Now, how do we approach allergen introduction in families with a very strong history of a food allergy? So I'm thinking of the mom or the dad that has peanut allergy or the brother that has peanut allergy. How do we educate our parents on this?
That's a tricky situation. I think, again, what I say to families is I give them all the evidence about the importance of the introduction. And then I quote a very good colleague of mine, Hazel Gowland from England, who's done her PhD in food allergy, but she's got multiple food allergies herself. She always says, if a kitchen is clean enough that you want to eat in it, it's clean enough for safe allergen control. And so I say you may have a peanut allergy in the house, but if you clean your surfaces with soap and water appropriately, dishwashers are amazing in getting rid of food allergens. You don't have to be scared. So, have the allergen in the house, have set times when you're going to introduce allergens to the subsequent child or the baby. Perhaps choose twice a week when the older kid is playing, sports, or if dad's got the allergy when dad's at work. We did at the beginning ask the grandparents to actually do the introduction, but I soon enough learned a big mistake because the grandparents don't want to get involved. They're very anxious, so they don't give the allergens. You can't ask the school or the nursery to give it because, they're scared to have allergens there as well. And so I think the best place for a child to eat the allergens is at home, at set times, perhaps when the allergic individual is not present. If I'm allowed, a friend of mine, Tamara Hubbard, is literally just publishing a book, May Contain Allergens, and she's a licensed therapist, and she has a chapter in the book where she actually discussed this whole concept of anxiety in families and how to deal with that. But the biggest thing that you need to remember is that little one needs to get the allergen in often and in a safe environment.
That book sounds fantastic. I will also link to that down in the show notes if you're interested in diving into this topic even more. And Carina, you just mentioned on that last thing that the most important thing is that infant needs to be introduced to that allergen, because I think a lot of parents still think that because they're allergic, their other child is allergic, that the baby will also be allergic. So how do we really get through to them and over that anxiety? Like, how do we maybe share some evidence that shows early introduction will prevent this? I'm curious to just help them, get through this.
Yeah. So in the LEAP study where the parents introduced the peanut early in the children's diet, and they did not introduce peanut in the subsequent child, because there was peanut in the environment and peanut in the house, but the baby wasn't necessarily eating it, we saw very high rates of peanut allergy in that second generation, if I can call them that. And so really, 2 things is when you've got peanut or allergies in a family, the child is at higher risk of having allergies, not necessarily the same allergy, but they are at increased risk of allergies. If peanuts or allergens are around, we don't want it to enter the immune system through the skin because that causes allergies. We want it to enter the immune system through the gut because, the gut actually stops allergies. And, early is as safe as it can do, as you can do it. And that's normally what I would say to families when I talk about all these anxieties.
All right. Well, looking to the future, because there's so much fascinating research going on with allergens and introductions. What are some exciting research that's ongoing or innovations that you think are going to shape how we prevent food allergies maybe in the next 5 or 10 years?
Okay, so I think, we have focus on food allergens and we have the answer. Stopping food allergies, it means we need to eat the food allergens. But I'm also chair of the immunonutrition work group of the European Academy of Allergy and Clinical Immunology. And we are definitely moving away from just focusing on the food allergens and think about this whole bigger area of immunonutrition. And I think this is really where we are moving. And immunonutrition really takes into account lifestyle factors like exposure to greenness. It addresses ultra-processed food intake because ultra-processed food, there's a number of issues. They are sterile, otherwise the food's going to go bad. So we don't have that natural microbial load going to the gut as you get when you just bite into an apple. They contain emulsifiers. Emulsifiers literally turn into a soap once they get into the gut. They destroy the gut barrier and the allergens can easily enter into, the bloodstream and aggravate the immune system. I think we're going to think about how we're cooking and the microplastics in our food. We're going to think about how we are washing our dishes. Now, I do love a dishwasher, but the rinsing aid is not a great idea because the rinsing aid also destroys the gut lining and the allergens can slip through and aggravate the immune system. And then something that I've studied a lot is diet diversity. My data have shown with each additional food you give a baby between 4 and 6 months of age, you reduce the risk of a food allergy by 10 years with 11%. And with each additional allergen you give them, you reduce the risk by 33%. So we're really going to look more about, plant-based diets, diversity of the diet, and rather than perhaps focusing on just single allergens, think about how allergens fit within an overall diverse diet. So I think it's a very exciting time for really addressing allergy prevalence, but also just overall immune health.
Oh, I couldn't agree more with you. Immunonutrition. I mean, it's a fascinating branch of nutrition research, and I really can't wait to see what else we come out with. So, Carina, I have learned so much from you. This is very applicable to me in my day-to-day practice. So thank you so much for just sharing the evidence, the statistics, and kind of like the how-to of introducing allergens to our families. So if someone wants to connect with you, learn more about you, or just follow you, where can they find you online?
Okay, so with my background in immunonutrition and diet diversity and allergen introduction, I have been involved in development of a product which is called Grow Happy. The website is www.letsgrowhappy.com. We actually have 5 immunobutters. So we have peanut, cashew, walnut, sesame. And each of these butters are mixed with 2 to 3 vegetables so that we can introduce the allergens within the context of an overall diverse diet. Every ingredient was chosen intentionally. I studied the egg that we used in the butters for many months. The blueberries we specifically added to peanut because I have 2 papers published this week showing that blueberry intake in the first 6 months of life really increase the good bacteria in your gut and it drives down the allergy immune cells. And so you can contact me by going onto this website. I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn, but probably the best way to contact me is via the Let's Grow Happy website.
Well, thank you so much for your contribution to the literature and the research in this field. It's fascinating, and I'm really excited to see where we go next. So thank you so much for being here, Carina. I'm sure I'll have people wanting you back on to discuss that egg and milk ladder. So thanks again for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
So that's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for being here. Now take a quick screenshot of the podcast, share it in your stories, and tag me at Exam Room Nutrition, or shoot me a DM if you have any questions about anything we covered today. All right, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.